was hoping to come on air tonight with a bit of a lighter offering for you. You know, turkey pardons and the Macy's Thanksgiving parade and all that. But instead, we need to talk about the downward spiral of violence in the United States, being led by a left that is now openly excusing, if not cheering, attacks on anyone who has anything to do with the Trump administration. And which not only that, but also seems hell-bent on driving the U.S. towards a crisis of legitimacy far worse than anything we saw on January 6th. Now, by now you know the story of the two National Guards members who were gunned down in cold blood in Washington, D.C. yesterday, allegedly by this man, Afghan National Rahmanullah Lakanwal, who, details are emerging, turns out to have worked for the U.S. government, including agencies like the CIA, in his home country of Afghanistan, and was brought into the U.S. by the Biden administration in 2021 during the chaotic withdrawal of American forces from Afghanistan, which, of course, we all recall, saw thousands of Afghans let into the U.S. after vetting processes that were, to say the least, not great. But more about that in a moment. What is even more about the disturbing case here, in which Lakanwal allegedly snuck up on one of the Guard members and shot him in the head, and then fired several shots at a second Guard member before he was overpowered, has been the reaction of so many in the U.S. to the shootings. Because, you see, to hear them tell it, the victims were National Guards stationed in D.C. as part of Donald Trump's effort to clean up the nation's capital. Here's how one MSNBC commentator put it as the news was breaking.
So much controversy happening in the United States right now with ICE, who are also wearing uniforms and wearing masks. And so there's, you don't know, people walking around with uniforms in an American city. There are some Americans that might object to that. And so apparently this shooting has happened.
Hey, you know, people don't like ICE agents and the National Guard around, so is it any surprise that they got popped? That seems to be the attitude. And you know what? It's sick. But, of course, this was nothing on the way the media has been whipping up hysteria about the National Guard in recent weeks, comparing them, oh yeah, to Nazis and the like. Here was CNN just a few weeks ago, where they were speaking to a retired Major General and professional Trump hater.
What the president is doing through the Secretary of Defense is creating units, official military units, to, quite frankly, watch the American people. And that's the thing that is absolutely abhorrent. It reminds me so much of what happened in Germany in the 1930s.
Germany 1930s, yep, we know what that means. And around the same time, Oregon Democrat Congresswoman Maxine Dexter was talking about doing everything she could to fight the National Guard coming to her city of Portland.
What I would say is an extraordinarily dangerous precedent by militarizing our city and moving towards a dictatorship.
Here's a leader of the African American community in Washington with his thoughts.
We believe that the National Guard and the military occupation is the first step into rounding black people up and putting them in detainment camps here in Washington, D.C.
Wow, gotta love that one. And hey, here's a little icing on the cake. Another Democrat, Senator Alyssa Slotkin, here talking about the National Guard coming to shoot civilians.
It makes me incredibly nervous that we're about to see people in law enforcement, people in uniform military get nervous, get stressed, shoot at American civilians. It is a very, very stressful situation for these law enforcement and for the communities on the ground.
So now, again, we don't know the alleged shooter's motives in D.C., but we do know this. Prominent Democrats, not crazies, prominent Democrats, legislators, leaders, and ex-generals have been openly saying not just that they disagree with sending the National Guard into cities to help clean them up. I mean, if they said that, that's perfectly fine. That's political debate about policy. That's all covered by the First Amendment. And you want to have that debate? Hey, I say that's great. I don't have a problem with it. But instead, no, they're not saying that. It's not reasonable debate. They are instead portraying the National Guard as an existential threat to civilians, to black people, to democracy itself. Now, let's go a little deeper into this, shall we? I finished with Senator Slotkin there for a reason, because this is not her first rodeo. No, here she was just the other day joining a number of other Democrat luminaries, many who, just like her, coincidentally have ties to the intelligence community and have been urging uniformed servicemen and women, as well as intelligence officers and other national security professionals to, well, there's no other word for it, disobey orders. Not a specific order, mind you, but anything they think comes out of the White House that they feel might be illegal.
I'm Senator Alyssa Slotkin.
Senator Mark Kelly.
Representative Chris Deluzio.
Congresswoman Maggie Goodlander.
Representative Chrissy Houlihan.
Congressman Jason Crow. I was a captain in the United States Navy.
Former CIA officer.
Former Navy.
Former paratrooper and Army Ranger.
Former intelligence officer.
Former Air Force.
We want to speak directly to members of the military
And the intelligence community.
who take risks each day
To keep Americans safe.
We know you are under enormous stress and pressure right now.
Americans trust their military.
But that trust is at risk.
This administration is pitting our uniformed military
And intelligence community professionals.
against American citizens. Like us, you all swore an oath.
To protect and defend this Constitution.
Right now, the threats to our Constitution aren't just coming from abroad,
But from right here at home. Our laws are clear. You can refuse illegal orders.
You can refuse illegal orders.
you must refuse illegal orders.
No one has to carry out orders that violate the law
Or our Constitution.
Of course, none of them can point to any illegal orders because there haven't been any. But look, no offense there, but being in the Army or being in the National Guard or the CIA isn't like, being a Unitarian or something. You don't just get to believe what you want and follow your bliss and still put on the outfit. That's not how it works. Meanwhile, it's not just this group I just played for you who have been dubbed the Seditious Six, who are calling for troops to stop obeying orders. Check this out. It's a new outfit calling itself the Orders Project, and it has mysteriously and coincidentally sprung up. Not only are they putting up billboards outside military institutions like Fort Bragg, again encouraging troops to disobey orders, they have also set up a website and are encouraging, this is just nuts, encouraging troops to organize using encrypted messaging apps like Signal for, well, whatever's coming next, we don't know. Now, all of this, of course, is dangerous, dangerous stuff, and you don't even need to think very hard to imagine how this sort of behavior would be treated if troops were being told by the right, by conservatives, to ignore a Democrat president. You'd never hear the end of it. But these luminaries and lobby groups, well, this is really sinister because instead of telling troops that, they follow orders, that's what they do, they're telling troops they need to pick a side. That is, they are acting like the U.S. is some sort of dictatorship, and the military has to decide whether or not to stand with the dictator, i.e. Trump, or join the resistance and stand up to the regime, presumably to help overthrow it. Now, not to sound paranoid, but it does sound like there is some sort of soft version of what is known as a color revolution being organized here, and that we are heading towards some sort of inflection point where people are setting up in the background the sort of infrastructure and networks needed to force a crisis of legitimacy on the Trump White House. Now, it could be that all of this preparation is preparation for next year's midterm elections, or it could be connected to the military buildup and potential action going on, potentially in Venezuela. But either way, it seems like there is an effort to create, again, underground resistant networks within the American government and security infrastructure that will then lead, as we have seen in other countries, to so-called spontaneous demonstrations, claims that elections are illegitimate, media support both domestically and internationally, loss of support for the regime by the military, and eventually a changing of the guard. We're seeing the groundwork laid also with movements like the No Kings protests from a few weeks ago, and we've seen elements, too, of this playbook before. Recall the 2020 George Floyd riots, which were nothing short of an attempt to destabilize the country. Successfully, I might add, in the run-up to the 2020 election. We are also seeing a further push to amplify the message that if you go along with Trump, you could be in real trouble when the wind changes direction. Here's this little gem from MSNBC or MS Now or whatever they're calling it. It's former White House spokeswoman Jen Psaki, and she's seen here chatting to former Army Judge Advocate General Mark Kirshner about what might happen to anyone who tries to prosecute the seditious six for, well, sedition.
What do you think, as a lawyer, what do you think the consequences should be for people who are abiding by following these steps from the commander-in-chief when they seem to be complete overreaches of power?
They're following unlawful commands from Donald Trump. And if you're committing offenses and your defense is going to be, I was just following orders, you know, that didn't work out so well at Nuremberg.
Nuremberg, get it? Trump and his ilk are just like, you know who with the funny mustache and his cronies, and, well, it didn't work out too well for them. Oh, by the way, speaking of Jen Psaki, remember before when I was talking about the Afghan fellow with ties to the CIA who was alleged to have shot those National Guards members? Well, here she was back when she was Joe Biden's chief flack, assuring us that everyone who was brought into the U.S. from Afghanistan after the debacle of the fall of Kabul was properly vetted.
I can absolutely assure you that no one is coming into the United States of America who has not been through a thorough screening and background check process.
Sure, Jen, I believe you. Millions wouldn't.